that list downstairs.
So welcome to all those who have joined us online for this live stream workshop on the topic of gender in orchestral leadership. My name is Sarah Sue and I'm Head of Strings and Chamber Music at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. At the RIAM each year we hold orchestral auditions at the beginning of every academic year for undergraduate and postgraduate students. This is to audition for placements in orchestral projects during the year and also to build up experience, audition experience that's required for the orchestral audition, for orchestral auditions. For the past 2 years, the RIAM has held these auditions blind. So there has been a curtain or a screen separating the audition candidate and the panel, meaning that the two cannot see each other, which is a standard professional practice. Therefore, I'm joined today by faculty and guests from last week's audition panel, Martin Johnson, who is Section Leader Cello of the RTÉ National Symphony Orchestra here in Ireland, Sarah Quinn, who joins us on Zoom, who's Sub-Principal Second Violin of the London Symphony Orchestra, and David Collins, who's Head of Wind, Brass and Percussion at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And I'm also joined by 2 students who took part in the auditions, Erin Hennessey, a Master's violinist, and Peadar Ó Loinsigh, BMA's cellist as well. So the workshop today explores why we implement this blind or screened audition process, the benefits and the drawbacks of it, and also how this relates to wider gender issues in the music profession. The workshop is also closely connected to the RIAM's research into this area, which is part of a cross-conservatoire EU project called Muse in MAP. And this project is in collaboration with Santa Cecilia Conservatorio in Rome, the Yaşar University in Turkey, the European University in Cyprus, and the Association of European Conservatoires. And the overall Muse in MAP project aims to develop and promote student self-leadership skills in conservatoires. So I'm therefore also delighted that we are joined by RIAM's researcher into this specific issue of gender in music leadership, Lynsey Callaghan, who's a music educator and a conductor as well. So welcome to Lynsey and Sarah who join us on Zoom, and everyone today in the room. Earlier today we had 2 really wonderful post-audition workshops with Martin and Sarah Quinn, and a number of students took part in these auditions, in these workshops. And we thought we'd start the session today with a demonstration of what the blind or screened audition process is really. So for those of you who don't know what it is, you can see it live. And Erin is I'm going to invite Erin now to go behind the screen and to take up her violin and get ready to play. So at this point, obviously, I've introduced Erin, so we all know who she is, so this is not a real process. But what would have happened in an audition is that Erin would have come in through another door and entered behind the screen, so none of the panel would have been able to see her. And then the orchestra manager or the audition coordinator would announce her by her candidate number only. So the panel only know the candidate by their number. They don't know the gender or anything else about the audition candidate. So I'm going to ask now if Erin might play, and at this point in the audition she would have played already her concerto, and then the panel would ask to hear her excerpt. So this is the point we're joining now. So Erin, if you'd like to start by playing your Mozart 39 finale. Thank you so much. And now I'll ask you to step in front of the screen, and we're going to start the session with a sort of mini masterclass or an insight into what happened basically in the workshop. So if you bring your violin with you, and I hope that you can still be in the picture here. And Sarah is just going to work with Erin for a few minutes.
Is Erin going to stay behind? Where is she?
Yeah, I think we're just moving. Yeah.
So I've just taken my headphones out for a minute because I think I can hear better. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Whoops. Who's that? Hello. Ah, there she is.
Great. So, Sarah, I'm going to ask if you're still there.
I'm not hearing anyone very well at the moment.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yeah. So maybe, Erin, if you could come like over here to where you're seated, I think that would be the best thing. If you could bring the stand and you can take your microphone off, that would be great.
Sarah, I don't hear you at the moment. Are you speaking?
Yeah, I am. Okay.
Is that right?
So, Sarah, Quinn, can you hear me and see Erin?
I can see half of Erin, so that's probably fine. Oh, there she is. Brilliant. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so Erin, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well done. So Erin and I sort of virtually met already today. So we did a little bit of work on these Mozart's excerpts. So what's already different for me is I could see you this morning, and just then I couldn't. And actually there was quite a difference in hearing you without seeing you. And in terms of how you played and how you performed, like we discussed earlier, you know, you can play this really well already. We've sort of been over that. But again, just some of those things that we touched on earlier about getting those extreme things across. Yeah. So things like the dynamics, so a real piano, a real forte. Somehow you have to, you know, feel like you're really completely overdoing it. So we have the beginning of that one, which is, you know, again, as we said earlier, it's quite a hard one to start, especially as it's piano and it's, you know, if you're feeling a bit nervous or under pressure or any of those things. So do you want to just start playing the beginning again in the most, like, crazy exaggerated piano you could possibly muster? Don't worry if it's not the biggest success ever, it doesn't matter, it's why we try things. And then really going for this huge forte. Because what I've found, listening to people behind screens, is that is what you lose. And because I can't see you, I don't see your body language either. So you have to sort of try extra hard to really project, not just your sound and those dynamics, but also your sort of musical intention. So do you want to just try it one more time and really go madly piano and madly forte? And if it doesn't work out, don't worry at all. Just give it a shot. Okay, great. So how does that feel to you?
It felt a little bit too quiet at the start, but maybe it came across better this time.
Yeah, I mean, the forte certainly comes across way more from where I'm sitting, obviously, and I'm behind a computer now and everything, so you must be really going for it. So do you, I'm going to try putting these headphones back in. Sorry, just bear with me 2 seconds. So I'm just going to see if that is better. Did you say that you found the piano was too quiet, or I didn't quite catch what you said about that?
Yes, yeah, it felt for me a bit timid at the start, but I'm not sure how it came through for you.
Sorry, I'm not quite picking up your speaking voice, Erin. I hear you're playing really well, but I can't hear what you say. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Is the mic here? Yeah.
Can you hear me when I speak over here?
Yes, that's amazing.
Right, so I just said that for me it felt a bit timid at the start in terms of dynamic and
yeah, because I was going to say for me, bear in mind where I am, obviously, it could even be quieter.
Okay.
That's probably not what you want to hear. But I think it is that thing with the screen, and that's what we're finding an awful lot more. Because obviously the reason, well, one of the many reasons for the screen is, you know, unconscious bias and all of that whole area. Obviously, I already met you this morning, so I knew who you were. But because we can see nothing of you, not your gender, not your race, nothing, how big or how small, nothing. We can't see anything about you. You have to tell us all of it through your playing. So I think in a way it sort of has to shape our thinking a bit about how we sort of present our excerpts, and everything just has to be quite extreme. Do you find that a bit kind of ugh? Or is it sort of make any sense to you, or do you find playing behind the screen? I mean, how do you find it?
I find playing behind the screen very challenging, but also really good for me, because I am a very physical player, and often that takes away from what I'm actually trying to put across to the listener. So it's an excellent exercise for me because they can't see me, so I really have to say what I'm trying to say with my violin and my body.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Erin. I think this is a really good point for us to move into the discussion. So I hope that you can all at home hear us on our individual mics now. And I think at this point, I think this is such a topic that I want to ask the students about how you feel, because this is one of the drawbacks really of the screen. As Sarah mentioned, you know, the benefits are of course that it removes this unconscious, and sometimes some people might have also certain biases they're conscious of. For example, if you know a student, it's your student, you mightn't realise that you're probably biased towards them, or could be for a specific candidate. So I want to ask now, Peadar, what's your experience playing behind the screen, and what are the things you like, and what are the limitations of it as well?
Yeah, it certainly provides a different set of challenges than auditioning directly to a panel. I suppose the lack of a perceived audience is something of a challenge, and I think you have to make an effort to, and even as was said there, to kind of express yourself even more musically, so everything has to be exaggerated, and there's kind of almost no connection. You don't develop connection that you would in a live performance in the same way. But that being said, that can also be, shall we say, an advantage in that maybe you would be less nervous. You don't have to talk to a panel. You don't see them looking at you. That can be quite a challenge in a personal audition. They're not sort of staring at you. That can be difficult. So that removes that challenge, and that makes it a little bit easier. And I suppose the other thing is maybe the drawback a little bit also is that you don't greet a panel, they don't greet you. You don't get a sense of the personality, and even as somebody auditioning for an orchestra, you don't really know what those people are like. They don't know what you're like. So there's no personality or no interaction there. I think that's also a little bit of a perhaps a drawback of doing it, but of course there are an awful lot of benefits. So you know, you lose some, you gain some.
Yeah, thank you very much. And overall, would you say that it's that are you pro the screen for auditions or not on balance?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's certainly. I think there would definitely be a level of unconscious bias, and even I've found that without realizing, we had an experience of actually sitting behind a screen in one of our performance classes, and I think you would, without realizing, have ideas of certain players. Now I knew who they were, but nonetheless that is definitely there. So I think there's a lot of good things there.
How do you find the situation? It can kind of be a non-event, in my experience as well, to step as an auditioner, to step behind the curtain, and as you said, not interact with the panel at all. You've taken your journey, you've had your flight, and you've sat down and you're all prepared and you're really keyed up, and then you play into an empty room, and actually maybe sometimes you rely on that bit of adrenaline to just take you a little step further than you might ordinarily play in your own practice room. Yeah. How would you rely on that adrenaline to get you to the next step, or do you find it easy to play because it feels like less of an important occasion?
No. I mean, for me personally, I think I'd actually definitely agree with that. And I think if you do a lot of performing as well, I think that's also definitely that sort of specific performance situation, as you said, the level of adrenaline and the feeling of a live performance is, I think that is one of the difficulties that you really have to overcome as a player. Now, of course, everyone is in the same position, so it's not, I wouldn't necessarily, everyone has that challenge, but I would certainly have found that to be a challenge. All right,
and Dave, I wonder what you think as a head of faculty. I think just going on from Peadar's point that, when he sat behind the screen in a performance class, in one of the audition training classes that we held before the auditions, that he sort of was surprised almost. And I have found myself as a teacher and someone who hears a lot of the students all the time, I have found myself surprised and I'm kind of reminded that I do have unconscious bias when you hear people in a fresh light when you don't see them. And what's your experience?
Yeah, I think from my experience and sitting on we had, for reference, Sinead Farrell, Principal Piccolo from the National Symphony Orchestra of Ireland, came in on Wednesday night to our performance class, and we had a similar, post-audition workshop. And it was really interesting with all the points that the two of us had kind of experienced. I doodled next to the auditions. I just had the numbers, and I kind of put initials of who I thought they might be, just to check afterwards. When the whole process is over and the seating has been made based on numbers, to come back and, certain instruments I was kind of, yeah, okay, that's pretty much where I had expected. And you might have somebody who's masters, second year masters, and somebody else who's BMOS 1, and there might be quite a clear difference or not. But in the flute auditions in particular, and Sinead didn't really know any of the players, and I was really way off people that I thought were, that sounds to me like this person, and it really wasn't. So it's the idea of unconscious bias that you see somebody walk in the door, and it could be a simple thing that we've got the Bachelor of Music Performance and we've the Bachelor of Education, and just because you're on the education degree doesn't mean you're any less of a player. You're looking for an equal split. So somebody that I might have thought, okay, that could be somebody on the performance degree actually was on the education degree, and vice versa. There were a load of things that were kind of thrown up from that, and listening to so many auditions. To pick up on what Sarah Quinn was saying about she was mentioning unconscious bias in a general way. It's everything from gender to a student that you might teach, or somebody else that you recognise, and when do you step in and when do you step out of these kind of different roles. I just think it's fascinating, and from a wind brass percussion perspective, it was very Marmite. Some of our students, like what Peadar was saying, that they might feed off the energy. They make eye contact with the panel when they come in. It feels like a concert. And some other students said for them, they feel so relaxed to come in. They see a screen. It takes away. They don't have to make small talk. They hate that. Certain students say, oh, it's the best thing ever. If I'm auditioning for a mentoring scheme with the National Symphony Orchestra, I don't know what to say to the panel. But with the screen, it's just focus on the music and focus on the excerpts. Other people love to see people from the orchestras and really feel that kind of, you know, like Martin was saying, the adrenaline, the extra that you might get from it. So a little bit like in the strings department, I think some students really pro and others not so much. So it's
So
yeah.
I wonder then, would you find then, as somebody sitting behind the panel, and having said that, that a screened audition would give a less accurate representation of what a player is like in an actual playing scenario in an orchestra?
Maybe we can ask Sarah, what do you think of that? Because actually, I know that the LSO has introduced screened auditions, and I don't know if you heard all the discussion, but do you feel that the screened audition does give you a full picture, especially thinking then who you then select for trial and move on to the next stage of the audition process?
So I think I know what you just asked me, Sarah. Sorry, I'm just finding when I unmute, I sort of lose the room. So I'm just unmuting right at the last minute. I was going to hop in and just say there was just a couple of things. I would totally agree with what Peadar and Martin are saying about, you know, that adrenaline, that kind of, let's face it, feeling a bit sick and a bit nervous kind of thing that often is what drives you. What we do at the LSO, not all sections, some of us do things slightly different. So the first round is the only screened part for strings, that is. And then the second round, the person comes in as normal. So you're just using that first bit to really see who you're going to put forward to hear more of. And when you hear more of them, it's not behind a screen. I suspect that will change in the future, and it will be totally screened, I suspect. The other thing I would say, I've got a friend who's in the orchestra, and she's loves wandering around in her socks and her pajamas, and if she could, that's just how she'd be all day, every day. But she said when she does a screened audition, she has to like put on the concert shoes, the concert clothes, the whole thing, because otherwise, even though it's a screen and no one can see her, she can't get that feeling. So I think if there's any way that you have, if you need to sort of somehow manufacture the nerves or the adrenaline or something to just make it feel like you're not just playing to nobody, because you are, it's just you can't see them. But it's a very hard thing to do. So she says she has to kind of slightly play mind games with herself and do various things to kind of try and make it feel like. But just to say, yeah, the LSO, we do screens in sort of different ways. I don't know if that answers what you were asking me. I'm going to mute now so I can hear.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I wanted to ask sort of Martin the same question. Your auditions in NSO are open, aren't they, at the moment?
They are, at the moment,
yeah.
There has been discussion over the last few years to make them screened auditions. So it's kind of, we're you might say a little behind the times on that, because it's changing pretty rapidly across the world. I did my first screened audition in 2001, a long time ago, and I'm sure orchestras have been doing them way before that as well. And I thought it was an interesting situation. I was not a student, but just fresh out of college, and so we went in. We had the candidate number, and interestingly, Sarah didn't mention this in the LSO, but we all had to take our shoes off because it was a wooden floor, so they can't tell if it's a man or a woman crossing the room to the seat where you have to play. And at a certain point, we played the 2 concertos, 5 excerpts, and the manager said they could ask you to leave at any point, which is kind of unusual situation. So already the adrenaline is up. So we're back in that zone that Sarah's talking about. So the blood is pumping. You play your 2 concertos, and excerpt 3 is going past, and you're waiting for the shout, and then 4, oh, I'm doing okay, and you get through 5, and then after 5, they invite you to the other side of the screen to play chamber music. I think we played Schubert quintet, with the string principals, and a Mozart string quartet, something like this. And so already then you feel more elated that you're progressing through the audition rather than just screen and then leave. So it was a slightly unusual situation. In the NSO, we haven't got there yet. And actually this a reasonable tradition of people being promoted through the sections. I myself an example of that in both the concert orchestra and in the symphony orchestra, where somebody from the section might move up or take the principal job, or the number 2 flute moves to the principal. So I think there is discussion about trying to bring more equality to that situation, so it doesn't look like they're just deliberately promoting their own people, but everybody has a fair chance from outside, which I think is an important point. You know, regardless of gender or creed or race, any of those things. And I have to say, when I started to read the document about what we were going to discuss today, it's really nothing that I'd thought about that hard before, you know, and I'm sure it's a big deal for a lot of people. I no intention of putting myself on a pedestal, but I really am just focused on is the playing great, and where do we go from that point?
And in a way, I think that all of us come from that place of wanting every candidate to play their best, and hoping that the next person who comes in the room will be a future colleague. Yeah. And I think that the thing that we've learned from the screen is that, and really re-examining ourselves and reflecting on this process, is that we can't all trust ourselves to kind of, you know, be up to the ideals that we uphold. And that's why maybe this is a good point to bring in Lynsey, maybe to give us data first, because Martin has also brought in another point of leadership roles within an orchestra, which is it's a very strict structure in an orchestra, I think, with specific principal roles very, very clearly designated. So I wanted, Lynsey, if you could maybe give us a little bit of data, and this is what Martin was referring to in the document, about gender balance in orchestras in general, and also perhaps in leadership roles as well.
Yeah, sure, Sarah. So in relation to positions of leadership in the music industry in general, we tend to see increasing numbers of women in leadership roles. That's according to Women in Music, an organisation championing gender equality. They say that the gender divide across all regions of music is roughly 70% male to 30% female. In a 2019 UCL, University College London survey, they showed that in the symphony orchestras of continental Europe, a little over 36% of members were women. So 36% of members were women, but in terms of leadership, that same study also showed that across 40 orchestras in the UK, the USA and Europe, 83.2% of persons occupying principal chairs were male, and 16.8% were women. So I think that's quite a stark statistic. 64.82% of co-principals were male, and 35%, a little over 35%, were female. And this study also further highlighted that some European orchestras have appointed even fewer women than the international average to principal chairs. And according to the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra's report in Britain recently, only 22 of the 371 conductors who are represented by British agents are female. That amounts to less than 6%. So I think anything to help those statistics balance a bit more would be appreciated.
So I think that is, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, I think, and thank you for raising this, and also for your research into this area, because it's just a stark difference, really. And I would say, I don't have figures on what the gender balance in music colleges, but certainly here at the Academy, it's not hugely it's not that there's anything like that gender balance in terms of students, that there are way more males studying music than females. It's fairly equal. So there's something that happens between exiting music college and going into the profession, and then the assigning of leadership roles, where there is, from the statistics, there appears to be a significant barrier to women assuming leadership positions. And maybe I wonder, Erin, what you think, because I mean, as someone who you've been selected for a leadership position in the orchestra for the projects coming up, and what's your feeling on this subject?
Does this work? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, I do feel like in music colleges and conservatories and all those sorts of schools, there is a high percentage of women, not only just in the student body but also in leadership roles, and that lends to sort of makes people a bit complacent about how we're doing in the wider sense of gender balance in classical music and in music in general. And it's absolutely true that once you get past the college level, that we don't seem to have quite as many successes as our male peers, and there's lots of different reasons that could be the case. And you know, right now I think we're just maybe only talking about screened auditions as helping that statistic, and in that regard, I'm 100% in favour of them. Yeah, I mean, I think.
But I think ideally, I mean, the idea would be that our industry, the orchestral industry, would rebalance slightly, and we wouldn't need the screen wouldn't be necessary in a way, because I do feel that there are huge limitations of it, and I think that's in terms of both the things that have been raised and the connections.
Does Lynsey have any information on how those figures have changed historically? Is the 80 to 30%, 80 to 20% situation, is that static through the last 50 years, or is it something that's improving? Is it getting easier?
I don't have any data to hand about that, but these studies are all from 2019, so they're fairly recent.
Yeah.
I would say that in relation to Erin's point, I think she makes a great point in relation to how many women there are in the industry versus how many women there are in leadership and in the principal roles. I think it's easy for us to find a woman to, as a mentor that we can see, that we can, look up to. But I think it's more difficult to find a woman in a position of leadership. So, for example, as a conductor or in a principal chair. Yeah. And I think in relation to Sarah's point, the makeup of the panels can also help with that. So I'm very interested in looking at who makes up the panel and what is the gender diversity in that. And I wonder if if either Sarah or Martin could speak to that.
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to?
Can I come in there on that point? Just, I wish I had some numbers and statistics, but I don't. But sort of roughly, so I joined the LSO 22 years ago. So I was 22. So young, female, in a very much male-dominated setting. So, but I would say that things have changed enormously. Now, that's 22 years ago, so it takes a long time. Nothing's going to change overnight. I would not say that I ever feel that I've been discriminated against because I'm a woman, but I do feel that you are certainly more, I've always felt a bit more judged than men, say, not necessarily discriminated against, but there certainly is judgment there. And I think that's just, it's often a generational thing. Sometimes more senior members of any organisation can just feel that way. When I joined the LSO, there was 9 of us. And there is somewhere between 33 and 36, something like that now. So, that's quite a difference, but it has taken a long time. And the first time I ever saw a woman conduct, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's a woman conducting. I hadn't seen a woman conduct, whereas now, it's, of course, those numbers are still not high enough, not by any stretch of the imagination. But, Mara Nosop, Shen Jiang, some of the younger ones like Elim Chan, Dahlia, all these coming through now, and those would be a regular. Susanna Malky, people like this would be regular fixtures in the seasons of most symphony orchestras, and that certainly wasn't the case when I first joined the LSO. So I don't know if that sort of answers that point at all. I do think things are changing. Our managing director is a woman. It doesn't stop people commenting on it and mentioning it. Like I said, there's always that judgment there. But certainly things are going in the right direction. I mean, very slowly, but it feels to me like hopefully, you know, and we can get momentum behind it. But you look at youth orchestras, you know, when I was in EUIO a very long time ago and we all had blue dresses, you looked at the string section and it was a sea of blue and sort of very typecast in that way that all the percussion were boys, all the brass were boys. And now that's changed a huge amount, I feel, over the years. Lots more women, certainly in those areas of the profession, and long may continue and increase. So I don't know if that helps at all. I'm afraid I don't have hard figures for you.
Thank you, Sarah. And maybe Dave, as a brass player yourself, as a trumpet player, you might wish to comment on that issue and maybe how we can change stereotypes of what instruments people should learn. You know,
yeah, I think on that, and it's to do with a point that Sarah Quinn had made also, that it's kind of what you're seeing also, and who makes up the panels. You know, if you have an all-male panel and you've got 3 male trombone players and 1 female trombone player, and the panel is going, I don't know what it is about these 3 guys, but there's something I really like about them. It's probably a panel issue. You know, if there's no female voice on that, then, you know, is that something the orchestra could be doing? These are the kind of, they seem like really simple process decisions, but they have such a big difference on these appointments. And as Sarah can attest to, after 22 years, you know, that orchestral jobs, people are going into jobs, and you know, most people are kind of staying there for X number of years, and it's something that if it's not addressed at the very beginning like that, all it takes is, you know, a flurry of appointments, 10 appointments in an orchestra over 2 years, all of them are male, and you could be 10, 20, 30 years before you start to see before you see a change. So it seems like a simple process decision that, okay, do we have a gender balance on the panel? Is there any diversity? Is there kind of, you know, is it all the same faces making the same decisions all of the time? And then how do we address it? Because if it is, that's a major issue. So there's some systemic stuff there that I think really, and I do think is being addressed, but at what rate and in different orchestras, different ensembles, different. You know, Martin, I don't know how you.
Sarah mentioned the generational. I think that's kind of a really interesting word of part of this process. And perhaps if all the panels were made up of people in their 20s, we wouldn't even have this discussion right now. Maybe there's something to be investigated in this area. You know, you're talking about an all-male brass panel for a brass job. Now, if there was a woman, or you know, maybe a few ladies on the panel, the outcome would be significantly different. Maybe it wouldn't be, but
yeah, I think for me, just even going back to the screened audition idea, that at that very first hurdle, that if it's all about the music, if you know, you're speaking about the second round, you come around from behind the screen, and Sarah was also mentioning it, that maybe second or final round could be in person. The idea that with nothing else but the music, that you would hope to see, you know, if we've got 50% of people coming out of college, male, and 50% female, that if there are 8 people going forward to the second round or subsequent rounds, the ideal of having 4 and 4, 5 and 3, just based on the music, is probably what should be happening. It would be difficult to think of a situation where 8 or 10 people are going through from a screened audition and you're not seeing any women. So I think just bringing it back also even to the idea of the screened audition. I see what you're saying about a generational thing, but some people 50s, 60s, 70s are more progressive than anyone else. And on Sarah's point about EUIO and the kind of blue dresses, there was a conversation recently. Francis McGee, principal tuber from the National Symphony Orchestra, he did an ECYO, European Community Youth Orchestra, which gives away his age a little bit. But he went and he got measured in his local tailor, and you sent in your measurements to get your tails. And at that time, the orchestra were sponsored by Armani, and both male and female members of the orchestra got tails. And he's super fit and healthy and still fits into his and has his Armani tails. But it's really interesting to think that kind of 70s, 80s, you're looking at Armani going tails for women and tails for men. And that actually, you know, maybe it was an outlier at the time, but you would hope that things are moving more in this direction. And sorry, lots of things.
No, but that's so interesting. I think that there are always, I mean, in my view, you know, there are always progressive voices in every generation, I guess you could say. And I think one point you raised, which was, I think, really interesting, was this idea of the responsibility of those who are putting in place operations, in a way, to make sure those operations are leading to the outcome that we're aiming for. And the outcome we're aiming for is to be fair, really, you know. And I think we can often be so busy and just want to get through the process that we don't put in enough thought into exactly who is sitting on that panel and how we're going to do it. And I mean, Erin or Peadar, I can't remember who exactly said about the process of the screen. It's not the only way, it's not the only thing, it's just one element that we're trying to do in an attempt to make a fairer profession for all of us to work in and to be in and to perform in together. So, I mean, maybe I wanted just to ask everyone, really, and I think, Lynsey, I'd love to know what your research has shown, or what you're thinking of, or the direction that you're thinking of going in terms of I guess, finding really solutions for the future to make this a fairer process and to represent both genders equally, and those who also don't fit into to one of those two gender categories as well. How do we make this an equal and fair process for everyone?
So,
hard question, sorry.
I'll try and address it in a few different ways, but I think, first of all, the acknowledgement that not everyone will fit into the binary gender expressions, and also there are other ways in which people will be discriminated against, such as the colour of their skin, the type of accent that they speak with. I think that for me, standing behind something where none of that comes before the music would be a really helpful way to address the process. But of course, if women don't want to assume positions of leadership, that is another possibility as well. So we have to ask ourselves, is it that the students coming out of college don't want to audition to be conductors or principal chairs or co-principals? Is it a desire? Is it that they feel like they don't have the skills, the confidence, the competencies? Is it that they are auditioning but not getting the positions? I think to have the data surrounding that is really important, and that's part of what our research is going to try to do, to see on exiting conservatoire training, will the female students want or have aspirations for assuming these positions? So for me, that's a really important question to ask as well. And if not, why not? And can we help them to be able to develop the competencies, skills, values, visions that might encourage them to audition for more leadership positions in music? So that's what a lot of the research that we're about to undertake surrounds. In terms of barriers to women obtaining positions in leadership in general, so not specific to music, I think the American Association of University Women produced a very interesting document outlining 4 barriers to women obtaining positions of leadership. So one is that the power structures value old stereotypes of masculinity. I think that affects a lot more than just women, and intersectionally it has problems as well. That women have fewer connections and networks, that there exists bias and discrimination towards women, and of course the closed auditions or the cloaked auditions are helping with that, and that there's a lack of flexibility in workplaces that do not allow for a family life. Again, I don't know if that's something that the younger people exiting college will have concerns around, but I'm really interested in undertaking the surveys and the questionnaires and the interviews that we're about to try and get a little bit more insight into what are the problems and can we help. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. You've raised so many interesting points there. I mean, maybe we can touch on just firstly, the idea, like Erin, I mean, do you see yourself as you've attained leadership position in college? Would you go on with that and continue and seek a leadership position in the profession as well? What do you think?
Yes, I absolutely would. I would just say I think I feel like in terms of Sarah, Quinn said that she didn't feel like you said you didn't feel like you'd been discriminated against, but maybe did feel like you'd been judged. And I think that really rings true in that a lot of women would feel like they have to achieve perfection in order to be held at the same standard as their male counterparts, and that's even compounded 1,000 times more for black musicians and other minority musicians. Like you can't just be good enough, you have to be exceptional in order to even get a chance. And so that's quite daunting for any musician to just conceive of that and then think, am I really going to put all my eggs in this basket, you know, when it seems so unlikely that you will succeed.
Yeah, it's really...
Can I just come in there? Am I on? No.
Yes,
what
Sarah.
am I doing?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Yay. Lynsey, Erin, you seem wise beyond your years, can I just say, and you're doing a great job flying the flag for female students. Lynsey, you touched on quite a few things, and I think it's not just confined to orchestras or colleges or musical life full stop. I think women bear a huge burden generally, and I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. We take on an awful lot, and a lot is expected of us. And you know, when you look at the world we're living in now, you look at statistics from things like lockdown, where with homeschooling and all kinds of things, you know, it's been shown that women shouldered a lot of that burden. That's not to say that all the men weren't fantastic too, but it just seems to go sometimes hand in hand with who takes on, where there's extra responsibility, yeah, we'll kind of stand up and take it, but not, it doesn't always suit us. And one thing that you mentioned there was family life. So I have a son who's 6.5, and I consider myself a quite old parent. I didn't have a child till I was 37, so I'd been doing the orchestral thing for a very long time. And one of the things that I remember thinking about having a family is I can't do this. I can't tour for 3 months of the year. I mean, I don't now. But I don't see how I can do that job as well as I would want to, and even half attempt to do anything else well in my life. So that can be a very difficult balance to strike. That's not to say that all women want to have families and children, not at all. But the majority, I think statistics would show, do, and the majority would want to be the ones taking on more of the responsibility at home. That's not to say there aren't women who would want to tour all the time, and maybe they have a domestic situation where there is dad is at home, or however it works. You know, it works differently for everybody. You find your own way. But that can be quite a daunting prospect of how do I do all of these things. And another thing, just it's a small thing, but things like when I was talking about judgment stuff, a lot of how you look. No one ever says that man's tails are lovely, but they always say, well, that's a nice dress. Or when the soloist comes on, you know, what's she going to wear tonight? And that's because there is huge variety, and, you know, women can look very different from one day to the next. But one thing we've done, and I think it's been very successful, is we've changed our dress code. Now, it's not been easy, because a lot of people love to wear a set of tails, but we've just changed it so that it's fairly non-binary, to be honest, and it's just black and white for all men and women. No ties, no nothing, whatever you sort of feel you want to wear. So it gives people a bit more freedom. I mean, that's a small thing, and it's a very small change, but it took an awful long time to do it. So all of these things, they're kind of small steps, hopefully going in the right direction. I've slightly blabbed on there now, so I'm going to mute myself again.
No, it's really interesting.
Can I just follow up on
yeah, sorry,
point?
Go ahead, Lynsey.
Sorry.
Lynsey, go ahead.
Okay. Just the idea of sharing stories, and that's a part of the research that we also hope to do, as well as questionnaires, is a little bit more qualitative research and listening to stories of people who are of women who haven't made it work, and, you know, knowing that that is an option. I can tour if I want to, and this is how I made it work, and these are the compromises that we had to come to an agreement about in our family. And just knowing that there are options, and of course not everybody will want that, but I suppose understanding the full gamut of what is possible, I think could really help younger people making decisions earlier on. Sorry, Sarah.
So there was just talking about family life as well. I would also say, there was something that I said about the generations. I'd also say my generation, and certainly the ones behind me, men's role, the man's role has changed massively as well. When I joined the LSO, it was predominantly men who all went off on every single tour. It was never entered anybody's head that they wouldn't go, or that they would take the night off, or they would take a patch of work off. There was very much men go out to work and they're doing everything. That is very different now. I feel a lot of the guys, my age, my generation, they don't want to be off touring endlessly either. And orchestras just have to adapt, I feel, to that. So, a father's role is very different now. So a huge amount, I know we are focusing a lot on women today, but a huge amount has changed, I think, for both genders in that regard, in terms of family life. And I think it's great if orchestras can be flexible in that regard, and that certainly didn't happen in the past. When I first joined, you went, that was it, I remember them talking about maternity leave. No one had ever gone on maternity leave. When I was first in the orchestra, so I was very young, and suddenly women were having families, and there was a sort of a crisis. Maternity leave, how do we manage that? So, all of these things, like I've said, it's a slow burn, but it's, hopefully, like I say, going in the right direction.
Thank you. And I wanted to just pick on one more point from the discussion overall, which is this idea of what we perceive leadership qualities to be. And I think this is something that maybe is another huge issue, that we kind of have decided that these certain things are valued as leadership qualities, and most of those things are aligned. I think, Lynsey, could you repeat that? With aligned as male qualities, did you say?
I think
leadership.
that was when I was speaking about the competencies. What competencies we believe are necessary in order to be able to assume a position of leadership. So what skills, what attributes, absolutely you're right, Sarah, what personal attributes make for a good leader. And that's all going to be part of the research, to try and see how students feel. Do they feel, I believe that power and control and total assertiveness is leadership? Because if you believe that they are the attributes that you need to be a leader, and then if you believe that you don't possess those attributes, maybe you don't want them, then maybe you are less likely to go and to want to assume a position of leadership later on, because you feel it's not a fit for me. But actually, should we be working even more primal than that? Should we be asking, what is leadership? Can leadership be nurturing? Can it be other qualities that are traditionally considered to be feminine, female qualities, which is so problematic in itself. Like, the whole thing is so complex, it's so difficult. But I suppose I'm interested personally for the research in finding out, what do students believe make a good leader, and if they believe they have those skills and competencies, and if they don't, how can we empower them to develop some of those.
And I wonder if anyone in the room has anything they wanted to say on that, about the qualities that we're traditionally thinking of as leadership qualities.
Interesting. You could write a finite and concise list of what we all assume are leadership qualities. I think something that's been missed out on that discussion, that's assuming that everybody who ascends to a leadership position is a good leader. And actually that's not always the case. And I think there's a certain percentage of, how should I put it gently, glory hounds, people who want to see themselves in this majestic role. They want to play all the solos, they want all the attention themselves, but actually they're not leaders in sense of looking after their team, nurturing people, reappointing the new members of the section. So there's a slight disparity in how we define a leadership position. Maybe, as Lynsey said, we clarify what those issues are first to help us move forward.
I mean, maybe Peadar, as someone who's in study, you're an undergraduate student now. I think you're in this position where you have this amazing possibility to shape the profession. I think with the way with your life really. And what do you think about this? About identifying really what leadership qualities are? Do you think that the traditional qualities that we think of as leaders are right or accurate? Or do you think we're really missing understanding a different way of leading? And I think that the ideal, everything that was brought in with the concept of female conductors, we were shocked at first, but now we're seeing that there are so many ways that have never been explored.
I mean, not necessarily at all. And I think also too, it's interesting how, if you take the conductor's role, for example, as an example, and how it's changed and arguably improved massively. So if you looked like 50 to 100 years ago, they were like authoritarian sort of dictators, effectively. And then I think recently, one of the big reasons is players don't put up with that anymore. They're right not to an extent, but they're much more, I suppose, and again, not to be labeling here, but would have more of those feminine qualities, where really what they're trying to do is, provide a forum for the players to express themselves as they see fit, and which is not in any sense of maybe what you would think in a sense as a traditional leader. And then I think you could also apply the same kind of things then to the leadership positions in an orchestra. They're not really meant to be, and that's just orchestral. I don't know about other areas of the music profession, but they're not really meant to be, or at least I don't think, nor have I necessarily seen it to be successful sort of dictators, I guess. And not to assume again, but it's just, there has to be a very big level of teamwork, and so I suppose no is the answer in a long-winded way.
I think just on that, Peadar, it's a great example, talking about conductors, and they're often the face of things, and they're out on the stage, they're the last ones, and this idea of the 50 to 100 years ago, kind of a dictator. I would say, and Sarah and Martin can agree, both Sarahs and Martin can disagree on professionally how they find it, but for me the ideal conductor that you might see on a podium now is a colleague with a stick, rather than an other, that there's the orchestra and then this other in front, and often even the language conductors use when speaking to an orchestra, it's more collegiate, it's more friends, colleagues, what are we doing, how are we thinking about this, rather than the ultimate, this is how this is done, this is how that is done. So even within conductors, it's such a, it's a really narrow area, and to look at the progression there, and hopefully that's also carrying into other leadership positions and roles. But both Sarahs and Martin may have a different view or experience of conductors on that, so that's my side.
Well, I think that is a wonderful place to wrap up this discussion, actually, with the idea that, with whatever your role is, whether you're that you're in a leadership role, whether you're a conductor, a leader, a principal, a co-principal, whatever, that we want to look at all these people as our colleagues, and our aim is, as musicians, is to to have colleagues whom we respect and whom we collaborate with. And our research and this whole discussion, and I guess this is just a snapshot into our process of trying to play a small part in developing the music industry and training for musicians entering the industry, to be a better place for everyone, and to give equal opportunities for all, regardless of their gender or their race or their religion or their nationality or anything else that they could be. So I want to just thank everyone for being part of this workshop today, and thank you also for Martin and Sarah for also doing the post-audition workshops, and to all of the people who have come for wind brass percussion also to be involved with this, which we don't have representatives here from now today. But I'd just like to say a huge thank you and an enormous thank you to Lynsey for also coming today to share that data with us, which I think is just so powerful. So bye from us now from the Royal Irish Academy of Music. Bye.
Awkward wave.